Driving. Yeah, something a lot of us do. Certainly here in America. Unfortunately, we are a very car-dependent nation, so it is literally your whole life here. It's part of everyone's life. It's crazy. This video deals with why driving in Europe is better than America. I don't necessarily doubt that. I just wonder why, right? So I'm actually here to learn. Driving in America is fun. It's big and wide open, but it can be pretty dangerous, and there are a bunch of crazy, goofy drivers out there. And some cities are easy to drive, and some are kind of confusing. So there's that too. This comes to us from a channel called Curleem, and this will be linked in the description down below so you can watch the whole thing uninterrupted. And this is a Instagram DM suggestion from Huba L. So thank you for that. Let's get to it. And I just noticed this is from an American like me. Well, not like me, an American expat. So he has presumably gotten to live in parts of Europe, and that's definitely something I've not gotten to do. But that's very interesting, I think. So pretty cool.
I love driving, and I especially love driving in Europe. I've been living in Europe for about 2 years now, originally from Orlando, Florida. I've lived in Amsterdam for about 2 years now.
Florida, that's a different animal too. Driving to Florida is a mess.
Amsterdam isn't exactly a car place, but I've always been a car person, and I've always loved driving. What I like about living in Europe is that European drivers are excellent, especially compared to American drivers.
Okay.
I was inspired for this video after watching a video by Tedward, which I'll link in the description below. In his video, he was explaining why Americans don't use a 3-lane highway correctly.
Really?
And it got me thinking how much I appreciate driving in Europe. European drivers are some of the best I've seen.
That video he's referencing sounds very interesting as well. Perhaps I should check that out sometime.
And I think some of the best in the world. And I'm hoping to explain why I believe so in this video.
I think our highways are just fine. I like the highway here. Then again, maybe I don't know better, right? That's why this is very interesting to broaden your horizons. And I honestly quite like driving here.
Now, I haven't done any research. This is just my perspective. Having lived in Europe for 2 years, having driven mostly around Western European countries, such as Netherlands, Switzerland, France, Germany,
cool, UK.
And in the US, I primarily have driven in Florida. So Florida's not exactly known for the best drivers, especially we get a lot of tourists who don't know how to drive in the US, and a lot of elderly folks.
Yes.
And just people who don't know the right rules of the road. So that's my benchmark. That's what I'm comparing.
Yeah, Florida, you get people like, Florida man, you get sun-baked people that have been on the beach too long, and you get millions of tourists a year. Florida has the most tourism out of any state per year. And, of course, you get like 95-year-olds behind the wheel. And, well, it all makes for a big ol' mess.
Yes. One of the main reasons I think European drivers are better is just driving in general is a privilege.
Okay.
So if you look at most European places, most European cities, you don't need a car. You don't need to drive.
That's what
anywhere.
I've heard.
Public transportation is well established. You can use a train, a metro, a tram to get pretty much anywhere you need to go. You can use public transportation to get pretty much anywhere, so you don't really need to drive.
Right.
Only if you live in more suburban parts of Europe, but even then, public transportation is still available.
Which, by the way, that sounds really exciting. I am someone who does enjoy driving, thankfully, right? Because I have no choice. As an American, you really are dependent on driving. It's just the way it is. It's crazy.
Europeans don't have to drive. They want to drive.
Right.
And because they want to drive, they put more effort into it. On top of that, getting a driver's license in most European countries is a much more involved and expensive process. For example, in the Netherlands, getting a driver's license can cost a couple thousand euros because you have to do mandatory driving lessons.
Wow.
On top of that, the age to get a driver's license is much.
Now, on the surface, I'm like, wow, I don't like that. That's way expensive. That kind of stuff is way cheaper here. But that's on the surface, guys. Obviously, logically and on paper, this is much better because not just, I guess, like that's kind of a lot of money, right? And it's a bigger decision. Makes people take it a lot more seriously. And if they're blowing that kind of money, they're going to be, doing it for a good reason. you know, driving is something they want to do and want to do well, and hopefully would kind of, you know, wean out people that would just want to road rage from the second they get in a car or something, right? So that's pretty shocking, though.
Much older than most states in the U.S. So I believe in the Netherlands you can start learning to drive around 16 and a half years old. That's when you do your theory test and then you start doing driving lessons. You don't have a full driver's license without restrictions until you're 18 years old.
Wow.
Compared to Florida, where I'm from, you start driving at 15.
Yes.
You do your theory test and you start driving at 15.
Right, with a permit.
You only have to have a learner's permit for 1 year.
Right.
And there's no mandatory driving lessons. Your parents can teach you how to drive.
That's right.
On top of that, the cost in general for driving is much lower. Cost of getting a driver's license is much lower in the U.S.
Yes.
And driving is kind of a necessity in a lot of parts of the United States, except for major metropolitan cities.
Right, like New
York
or something.
So getting a driver's license is less of a privilege in the U.S. and more of a necessity.
Yeah, agreed.
So that distinction alone, I think, contributes to a lot of the differences that I'm going to point out. So getting a
just looking, for example, driving a regular passenger car, is a big decision. And quite frankly, a big cost compared to what I would be used to here in the USA. And then looking on the side of the screen here, we can see an 18-wheeler, semi-truck, whatever we would call them, big rig here in America. I know, and I think, at least in the UK, they say lorries. I don't know what else you guys would call those, but you know what I mean. Big old cargo trucks. I imagine that's expensive because that's actually quite pricey for American standards, right? That's a few $1,000s to be able to drive one of those, and of course, extensive training. So if regular passenger cars are expensive, those must be like super expensive over there, I imagine.
Driver's license is a much more involved process, especially in countries like the Netherlands. In Germany, it also requires mandatory lessons. It costs a lot of money. So when they invest that much into getting a driver's license, they don't want to lose it. They want to. They learn to drive properly. They learn the right rules of the road. They don't want to do anything to jeopardize that, and they drive accordingly. You can see here in this example, I'm just outside of Amsterdam. There's nobody cruising in the left lane. I'm driving at 5:30 in the afternoon right now. Nobody is cruising in the left lane. The left lane is only for passing. You can see how people use the lanes. They're very well disciplined.
Yeah.
And that's a common theme. They're well disciplined drivers.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, this is just one little clip here, but I'd have to agree. Everyone looks like they're going at a smooth pace. I assume it looks like they're probably going close to the speed limit. I mean, obviously you're cruising decent at highway speeds, but it doesn't look like anyone's flying. Man, if you jump on I-90 outside of Chicagoland, across the whole suburbs of northern Illinois, woo, is it a speedway, let me tell you. People are going 5 lanes across. A lot of people are weaving. A lot of people are hard charging in groups of 3s or 4s. They're all, you know, speeding together, passing on the left, and, you know, going easily 85, 90 miles an hour in a 70. So it is crazy. That's just common. This looks like a little more calm, collected. It does. I got to admit.
This goes back to how they learn to drive. They have to take mandatory lessons. Their parents aren't teaching them to drive. Their parents aren't passing on bad habits about driving. They're learning the proper rules of the road.
Excuse me, I just choked on water.
Executing them while they learn to drive.
Sorry, guys. I saw a Tesla. I got excited. All right,
so even though you take a theory test in the U.S. on what the rules of the road are, you don't really remember that. You remember what you learned while you were learning to drive. Don't get me wrong. Not everybody follows every rule. You can see there are some more aggressive drivers sometimes, but it's not the norm.
Right.
And even the more aggressive ones tend to get on their way, get out of the way. They're not messing with anybody. They're not pissing anybody off. There's no.
Remember, I always do this in a lot of videos. I'm a car guy, and you'll see me do this a lot. I'm just fascinated by all these different cars. Obviously, I've pretty much known this from watching like Top Gear in the past and stuff over the years. Almost everything so far we're seeing here in Europe is hatchbacks or wagons, which I think is cool. I've had a lot of hatchbacks and wagons in my life. Still have a couple out in the garage right now. Yeah, I always think that's kind of cool. It slowly moves that way a little bit in the U.S., more in like the 2010s, I guess. But
so discipline is one of those key important attributes. The next thing is the roads in general. The roads are well maintained.
They are.
I'm going off of what I've seen
great
in the Netherlands and Germany. Not every European country has the same privilege. I've seen some pretty poor roads in countries like Belgium.
Okay.
And even I've heard in Italy roads aren't as nice. But you can see here the highway is well maintained. There are no potholes. It's quite wide. and people use the lanes correctly. So even though there's a lot of lanes, it allows for a lot of capacity because people actually follow the rules of the road. They stay to the right, they only pass on the left, they pass and then they get back over.
Right.
And that's the general way it works here.
That's the way it should work in the U.S. too. And keep in mind, there are a lot of good drivers here that do follow those, courteous rules. But of course, there's just a lot of people that don't, a lot of assholes that ruin it, kind of like the flow of traffic and, how everything aligns. So of course, it doesn't happen all the time. Also, may I mention, this road looks beautiful. Everything looks clean, nice walls, nice overhead markers, and of course the road itself looks great, so that's nice. Also, may I mention, here in Illinois, we do have really good highways. They tax us to death here, and we have tolls, which is lame because a lot of states around us don't. But our highways are really nice, but our roads, once you get into cities and stuff, they're atrocious.
So when they add more lanes, when the highway is wider, it allows for much more free-flowing traffic, a lot more capacity, a lot more cars. Unlike places like Houston where they added lanes, nobody follows proper rules there, so they continue to sit in the left lane, even if it's 16 lanes wide, and it doesn't help the traffic situation at all.
Right.
In this area, this is a speed-controlled area, so it's actually controlled by average speed cameras.
Wow.
I'll deep dive into that in a separate video, but the Netherlands has some of the strictest speed laws in Europe.
Now that's annoying.
Talking about the rules of the road, when you look at truckers, they also follow the rules very strictly in Europe. So discipline, learning the rules of the road, following them, these are important themes. The process to get a driver's license is much more involved, much more strict. Generally, Europe has higher speed limits.
Wow.
The Netherlands used to have a national speed limit on the highway of 130 kilometers an hour, which equates to 81 miles per hour.
Wow.
People used to drive faster than that.
That's
Recently,
cool.
as of March of 2020, there's a
that.
national speed limit of 100 kilometers an hour until 7 p.m. Some roads are still 100 kilometers per hour in general.
Okay.
I'll do a separate deep dive into that in another video about the Netherlands. But in general, countries like Germany or France, the highest speed limit you'll see on suburban highways is 130 kilometers an hour. And people drive faster than that. You can easily drive 140 kilometers an hour without any issue. And again, if everybody follows these rules of the road, driving that fast, even on narrow highways, isn't an issue. You can also see in the Autobahn, people driving much faster than that. It's a 2-lane.
I got to learn about the Autobahn. Obviously, it's very famous. I do know that people drive very fast. There's theoretically no speed limit as long as it's within reason. But I would really like to watch footage and learn a little bit more of the logistics and how it works and stuff. But even on other highways, that's very reasonable, right? 130 kilometers per hour, 81 miles per hour about. That's nice. That's faster than most U.S. highways. Most U.S. highways are 65, some are 70, and some are 75, with literally only a few way out in the desert in Wyoming or parts of Montana and stuff, you might find 80. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Highway, yet there's very little accidents. And that goes back to the discipline of following the rules of the road. People keep to the right. Even if somebody is driving faster than you, it's completely safe. Another reason driving in Europe is so much better, again, going back to the discipline, you'll see this as a common theme. There's very little distracted driving. People are focused on driving while they're driving. They're not on their phones. They're not eating. They're not really drinking coffee. They're not reading a book. They're not doing all of these crazy things you see people in America do while they drive.
Yikes.
They're focused on driving.
Right.
And they have to be focused on driving. You're not allowed to be using your phone. You're not allowed to be eating while you're driving. You're not allowed to be doing anything but driving while you're driving. You have to find the space. If a car's coming in the other direction, you have to squeeze to the right and make sure there's enough space. But when the road is empty like this, you can enjoy it. One difference with Europe, generally people don't use cars to commute. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people that do commute to work by car in Europe and European cities.
Right.
But in general, cost of parking is very expensive.
Okay.
Fuel is very expensive. People
Yeah,
don't
that's
use a
true.
car to commute if they don't have to.
That's, I think, why you see a lot of hatchbacks with really small engines or even diesel engines, and they get a lot miles per gallon, really high fuel mileage, because they kind of have to, right? Because fuel is very expensive in most of Europe, I would imagine. That's what I've heard, especially when you compare it to what we pay over here in the United States. It's typically much, much cheaper here. So that's another thing, right? a lot of people don't have to depend on a car as much, and it's expensive, and parking's probably more expensive. All these things add up. So, yeah, I can respect and appreciate that they don't have to rely on cars as much. I mean, that's a foreign subject to me, right, as an American, but I think that's really cool. At the same time, I do like driving. And I do think it's cool how you can still drive in Europe and enjoy it and have a good experience while doing it. I think that's really neat.
So people will often defer to public transportation to get to work. So people aren't driving regularly as much as they do in the US. And this is generally speaking, this is my...
I noticed that road is very, like, odd. This one, it's very small, right? He kind of has to veer over on, like, this shoulder over here, and then they do the same, and they barely kind of fit. And there's no line in the middle, so it's almost like it's a, what's that, like unilateral or like bi-directional road. Like you just go either way and just make room for people coming, going the other way. Kind of interesting. That's not something you really see at all here in America.
It's not scientific, of course. I like that I can choose to drive when I want to drive. I can enjoy driving. I'm lucky that I live in Amsterdam. I don't have to commute. I don't have to commute by car. Another thing I've noticed is when people are towing something or carrying cargo, it's well secured. It's covered with a net.
Is that a Seat in front of him? I know nothing about those other than I think they're like Volkswagen.
Things don't fly out of trucks. Things don't fly out of trailers.
Now this is a big one. When people secure their cargo there. Wow, that's awesome. As we see a trailer right there. Yeah, people have a lot of trouble doing that here. Oh my goodness. I've seen so much crazy, dumb crap in the road, and you're like, oh my God, I have to avoid this. Like, why is this in the road? Why is something shiny and sharp or a bunch of wood or a bunch of, like, you name it? Like, why is this in the middle of the road? And you're mortified if, like, God forbid, you look down at the radio or something for like 1 second, you look up and you don't have time to avoid it, and you hit something random on the road, and you're like, oh my God, what was that? Is it going to ruin my tires? Like, oh, it's the worst. Please secure your stuff if you're watching this from America. I'm sure there's places where that's good and bad. I'm glad to hear that people mostly secure their stuff in Europe because, yeah, that's a problem.
Towing something or
wherever I've
carrying something or hauling something, they're staying to the right, they're driving in the slower lane, they're not passing anybody, they're not driving erratically. Driving in Europe is overall safer. If people follow the rules, it makes for a...
I'm going to end it there, okay? We skipped around a tiny bit. Please check out the original video by this gentleman in the description down below. Watch the whole thing uninterrupted. In conclusion, I wonder if that's true. Are the stats, do they prove that driving in Europe as a whole is safer than in the USA? I'm not going to look them up. You can do that yourself if you would like. I'm going to say I assume that's true. I'm not going to argue that. I bet the stats are definitely show that driving in Europe is mostly safer than driving in the USA. I would probably agree with that. But in conclusion, that was very interesting to see an American expat perspective on driving in Europe. Very, very informative. I really enjoyed that. So thank you for the suggestion, guys. And please throw a thumbs up on this if you enjoyed it and learned something new. Of course, you can subscribe to this channel. We're on our way to 100K, and this is one of the best communities on YouTube. You won't regret it. And please, I can't wait to see your comments down below. Leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Have you driven in both? Those who watch in like New Zealand, Australia, places like that, do you agree with this as well? Is driving in Australia much better than Europe or America for that matter? You know, please weigh in on your experiences down below. I would love to hear them. And of course, in theory, I really hope to travel to some awesome places around the world someday. And one of the most exciting and fearful things at the same time is driving. I would be excited to drive different cars with different landscapes in different countries. Of course, that'd be awesome. But I'd also be a little nervous just because, like, you're on different roads. They look different, different signs, different road rules. That's about it, y'all. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. And until next time, drive safe, and I'll catch you later.